The skies above Orvalon Prime shimmered in deep shades of violet and blue. It was the day of the galactic peace gathering. Ships from more than 60 species floated above the planet, each one shining in its own colors, carrying rulers, warriors, and scholars. It was a grand event held once every 50 years. But this one was special. For the first time, humans had been invited. The Great Dome of Unity was filled with sounds of chatter, laughter, and music from many cultures. Tall aliens with glowing skin walked beside short insects. Like beings, creatures with wings folded them. Gently as they greeted others, everyone wanted to show pride, power, and beauty. They wore the best clothes and walked with confidence. In the middle of this, a single human man stood quietly. He wore a plain black suit. No medals, no flag. He had short dark hair, calm brown eyes, and a face that didn't show much emotion. He looked young, perhaps mid-20s, but moved like someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. His name was not known to many there, and he didn't try to make it known. Some watched him with curiosity. Others ignored him. A few whispered. Humans were new to this stage. Some still saw them as latecomers, weak in galactic terms. Only a few had heard of Earth's hidden strength. From across the hall came laughter. The 22-year-old alien royal from the Varanthian Empire stepped forward, tall, with silver blue skin and sharp golden eyes. He wore a robe that sparkled under the lights, for golden guards stood behind him. He was famous for his pride and for looking down on those he saw as beneath him. Look, the royal said loudly, pointing at the human. Is that what Earth sends to represent them? No titles, no guards, no respect. His voice echoed. Many turned to see. The human looked up at the royal. He didn't answer. He didn't move. The royal stepped closer. Did your world forget to send a leader? Or is this your leader? A silent boy hiding in a man's suit. Some aliens laughed, unsure if they should. Others stayed silent, watching closely. The human blinked once. His eyes met the royal's. No anger, no fear, just calm. Then, slowly, he turned around. Without a word, he walked away. No sound followed. Even the royal paused. What? The royal said, confused. No reply. The human kept walking, steady and calm, disappearing into the far side of the hall. The royal stood there, unsure of what he had just faced. His joke had fallen flat. Something about the human silence felt heavy, like a stone thrown into deep water. No one laughed now. Later that day, small talks began between species. Alliances were discussed. Trade routes offered. Weapons limits debated. But through it all, many eyes kept drifting toward the far end of the hall where the human had walked. Away. In a quiet corner, a Zarnian historian whispered to a young assistant. Never mock a human who walks away without a word. Why? The assistant asked. The old Zarnian looked at him. Because that kind of silence is not weakness. It's a warning. In the royal's private chamber, his advisor tried to calm him. You embarrassed him, the advisor said. He didn't react. That's not normal for a human. He's a coward, the royal replied. The advisor didn't answer. Hours passed. The royal expected some kind of complaint or response from Earth's side. None came. No messages. No signs of trouble. Just silence. On the second night of the event, the royal attended a private dinner with other nobles. They laughed about politics and compared the size of their fleets. But when the royal brought up the human again, the others looked away. Why do you all avoid the subject? The royal asked, frustrated. An elder from the Nathari race, with a wrinkled face and glowing purple eyes, leaned forward and said, I saw his face. It wasn't fear. It was choice. Choice? The royal asked. He could have replied. He didn't. And that means something? The royal laughed, but it didn't sound strong. Meanwhile, the human was not seen again during the gathering. Some thought he had left the planet. Others believed he was watching from the shadows. Either way, the mood around humans shifted. People stopped using the word weak. They started using words like unpredictable, quiet, and watchful. In the days that followed, the royal tried to bring attention back to himself. He made speeches, showed off a new warship design, even offered gifts to some races. But the attention was gone. The silence from that moment stayed in the minds of everyone. On the final day of the gathering, all leaders stood in a wide circle as they signed the peace declaration. When the nameplate for Earth was called, no one came forward. The seat remained empty. A murmur moved through the crowd. Earth refused. Someone asked, maybe they never meant to stay. Another whispered. The royal looked at the empty seat, then turned to leave. As he walked out, something caught his eye, a small device on the floor under the seat. He bent down and picked it up. It was a simple Earth data card. It had one file on it. The title said, "You mocked the wrong one." The royal froze. No sound came from his mouth. He dropped the card back onto the seat and walked quickly away. He didn't laugh anymore. The stars above Orvolon Prime slowly faded as the final ships left the system. The peace gathering had ended, but the silence left by one human stayed behind like a shadow. It was not just his quiet walk, it was the feeling that something deeper had happened, something unseen. The alien royal, proud as always, tried to shake it off. He returned to his palace on Varintha Prime, his homeworld filled with high towers, glowing rivers, and a proud history. His people welcomed him with music and honor. They cheered his name and called him brave. But the royal's smile was not as bright as before. Deep inside, a strange unease had taken root. The memory of the human's calm eyes followed him everywhere. No anger, no fear, just a quiet stare and then silence. The royal didn't understand it. Most beings yelled, argued, or at least defended their pride. But that human had walked away without a word, as if the royal's voice meant nothing. Days passed, then weeks. Small reports began reaching the royal's court. Ships near human space had gone quiet. Patrol routes that usually passed close to Earth's borders suddenly turned around. Some captains refused to go near at all. They say it's cursed now. A fleet officer told the royal, "Cursed?" The royal laughed, though his voice cracked slightly. "No proof, sire," the officer said. "Just fear. Some say unknown ships appear, then vanish. Others say messages go missing." And one scout reported strange shadows moving in deep space, shadows that didn't match any known ship. The royal brushed it off, but his thoughts grew heavy. He remembered the data card. The words still haunted him. "You mocked the wrong one." He had not told anyone about it. The card sat locked in a private drawer. Soon, rumors began spreading on the central galactic net. Peaceful colonies near Earth claimed they were visited by a silent protector. When asked who it was, they only said, "He wore no name." He asked no questions. But danger stopped when he came. Some dismissed it as myths, others grew curious. In secret, a few leaders sent quiet messages to Earth, simple ones, asking for talks, asking for peace, or simply saying, "We respect you." No answers came. That silence was louder than war drums. The alien royal grew restless. He gathered his advisors. "Why are so many afraid of a man who said nothing?" he demanded. "Perhaps," his oldest advisor said, "because silence shows control, and control is the true power." The royal slammed the table. "Nonsense. They fear a ghost." Still, he couldn't stop thinking about it. He ordered a secret mission. "Send one of our top scouts to Earth's edge. I want answers." The scout ship, light and fast, moved through space under stealth. It reached the edge of Earth's protected zone known as the Quiet Line. No warnings, no ships, just a black space that felt too still. The pilot scanned the area and whispered to the computer, no sign of threats. Then, the ship's lights flickered. A single message appeared on the main screen. "Turn back." No voice. No source, just two words. The pilot froze. He checked. For signals, none. No ships nearby. But his fingers shook as he turned the ship around and flew back at full speed. When the scout reported back, the royal's court fell silent. Only two words. One officer asked. The pilot nodded. "Yes, sire. But I've never been more sure in my life. If I didn't turn, I wouldn't be here now." Some laughed nervously. Others stayed quiet. The royal dismissed the scout. But he now knew this was not just fear. It was real. Back in his chambers, he unlocked the drawer and stared at the data card again. "You mocked the wrong one." He started having dreams. In one dream, he stood on a battlefield alone. A figure walked toward him, quiet, calm, face hidden in shadow. No sound, no weapon, just footsteps. The royal tried to speak, but no words came. He tried to move, but his feet were stuck. The figure stopped just a few steps away and said nothing. Then the royal woke up, sweating. Why didn't I leave him alone? He whispered to himself. News from other regions arrived. A group of pirates tried raiding a human cargo ship near a distant moon. None of them returned. When other pirates checked the wreckage, they found no signs of battle, just silence. Like the ship had been erased from the stars. Others reported similar events. Smugglers, warlords, and even small fleets that had tried to test human space were never heard from again. No war was declared. No public statements were made. Just silence. And the memory of one man walking away. Galactic leaders began changing their tone. Ambassadors from major races now avoided speaking ill of humans. Even the Galactic Council sent a message saying, "We respect Earth's right to remain silent." But Earth still said nothing. The royal finally made a choice. He would go to Earth himself, not to fight, not to mock, but to understand. His advisors begged him not to go. "You mocked him once. What if he remembers?" The royal answered, "That's what I want to know. Does he remember? And if he does, why hasn't he done anything?" He boarded a small royal craft and left quietly, with no escort. As his ship entered the edge of human space, no ships greeted him, no defenses fired. Just darkness and stars. A voice, calm and familiar, came through his speaker. "You've come." The royal's heart stopped for a moment. "I have," he said. "Then come alone," the voice replied. "Leave the ship." The royal hesitated, then stepped out in a spacesuit. A small platform lit up nearby. He floated toward it, and when he landed, he saw him, the human. The same one, same calm eyes, same silence. He said nothing, neither did the royal, for a long time. The stars were the only witness. Finally, the royal lowered his head. The platform floated in space, cold and silent. Stars burned softly around them, casting faint light on the two figures. The alien royal stood with lowered eyes. Across from him, the human stood still. He hadn't aged a day. His eyes were just as calm, his face just as unreadable. The royal opened his mouth, but no words came out. The human said nothing. No anger, no questions, just quiet. The same silence from Orvillon Prime. The royal finally forced his voice to work. "I came to speak." The human nodded once, a slow, patient gesture. "You remember me," the royal said. More like a question. The human gave no answer. "Just watched." "Why didn't you stop me that day?" the royal asked. "Why did you walk away?" A long pause. The stars seemed to hold their breath. Then the human finally spoke. His voice was soft but steady. "Because you weren't ready to listen." The royal blinked. "And now, you came alone. That means you want to understand." The royal took a step forward. I mocked you, insulted your people, and yet you never struck back." The human's eyes held a strange sadness. "Not every war is fought with weapons. Some are fought with choices." The royal felt something strange in his chest, a weight, guilt. He sat down slowly on the edge of the platform. "I thought you were weak. I thought silence meant fear." The human looked at the stars. "Most people do, until silence becomes the only thing they hear." The royal looked up. "What happened to the pirates near your borders? The warlords, even the smugglers?" The human didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, "Do you know why Earth stays quiet?" The royal shook his head. "Because we know noise invites challenge," the human said. "We know that showing too much power brings more power against you. So we wait, we prepare. We speak only when needed." "But you could have destroyed me," the royal whispered. "Yes," the human said, "but that would have proved your belief that humans are dangerous. Instead, I walked away, and now the galaxy watches you, not me." Those words hit hard. The royal remembered how others had looked at him after the event. Not with respect, but with caution. He thought he had won that day. But in truth, He had lost something greater, his honor. He looked up again. How do I fix this? The human stared at him, then asked, Why do you want to? Because I don't want to be remembered as the fool who mocked the silent one. The human nodded. Then listen. Don't speak. Just listen. And the human began to speak not about war or power, but about Earth. About how humans had been tested by their own mistakes. How silence came from loss, from understanding pain. How every quiet step was a step learned the hard way. The royal listened. He didn't interrupt. He began to understand that silence wasn't a weapon, it was a shield. And sometimes, silence held more truth than 1,000 speeches. When the human stopped talking, the royal felt different, not weaker, not smaller, but clearer. Thank you, the royal said quietly. The human gave a small nod. Then the platform. Lights blinked, and a soft tone signaled the end of the meeting. Your ship is waiting. The human said. The royal stood, but he didn't move yet. Will we speak again? Maybe. The human said, when silence is no longer needed. The royal stepped back into his ship. As it floated away, he looked through the window. The human was still standing there alone in space, unafraid, calm. Back on Varintha Prime. The royal changed. He no longer shouted in court, no longer demanded praise. He listened more, watched carefully, and when others mocked someone weaker, he said, Leave them, let them walk. His advisors were surprised. Some thought he had been broken, but others noticed something new: wisdom. The royal began reaching out to Earth through quiet channels, not for trade, not for power, but for learning. He asked for stories, history, ways of thinking. Earth replied, little by little. And the galaxy noticed. Slowly, the royal's name returned to the council's good graces, not as the loudest speaker, but as the one who had learned from silence. Many years later, in a classroom on Varintha Prime, young students learned the story of the peace gathering. One child raised a hand and asked, Why didn't the human fight back when he was mocked? The teacher smiled gently, because sometimes walking away teaches more than staying. But didn't that make him weak? No, the teacher said. It made him strong enough to let the galaxy figure it out on its own. And far away, on a quiet moon near the edge of human space, the same man stood once again, alone, watching the stars, calm as ever, waiting for the next one who needed to listen. Years passed, and the royal's reputation grew. He had learned the value of silence, the power of listening, and the strength that came from understanding. The galaxy began to see him as a leader who was calm and wise, not quick to react or insult, but careful in his decisions. Many still remember the day he mocked the human, but they also remember how he changed after that, how he became someone different, someone worth listening to. One evening, the royal sat on a balcony of his palace. The stars stretched out in every direction, as they always did. His thoughts were quiet, and his heart no longer raced with the old need to prove himself. He had learned that he didn't need to shout to be heard. He had learned that true power came from within, from understanding others, not from defeating them. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Sire, a message has come from Earth. He turned to see his advisor standing behind him, holding a small data card. The royal took it without saying a word and activated the message. It was simple, just a few lines of text, but the message itself sent a strange feeling through his chest. We've heard your changes, Royal. We see your growth. The quiet one watches. We invite you to Earth to learn more, not to speak, but to listen. The royal felt his heart race again, but not with fear. This was not a call for war, not a challenge, but an invitation to learn more about Earth, about the people who had quietly walked away from him all those years ago. Without hesitation, the royal gave the order to prepare a ship. He traveled to Earth in silence, much as he had years before, but this time there was no mocking, no laughter. The journey was peaceful, his thoughts clear. He thought of the lessons he had learned from that first encounter, and he wondered what more Earth had to offer. When his ship landed on Earth, he stepped out, and this time no one mocked him, no one laughed at his silence. Earth, as always, was calm. its people peaceful and full of strength. He was greeted by a small group of leaders. But they did not speak much. They didn't need to. Their quiet presence told him everything he needed to know. They took him to a small village, far from the crowded cities. It was a place where people lived simply, working the land and raising families. There was no need for the grand speeches or ceremonies the royal was used to. Here, people just lived, and the royal could feel it, the peace. The quiet strength. As they walked through the village, the royal saw families working together, planting crops, fixing homes, and helping each other. No one rushed, no one shouted. Everything moved at its own pace, calm and steady. One woman, an elder with gray hair and soft eyes, noticed the royal watching. She smiled and walked over to him. "Welcome to Earth, Your Highness," she said gently. "We have been waiting for you." The royal bowed his head. "I have come to learn." "Then listen," the woman said. "You are not the first to come here seeking answers, and you won't be the last. But those who come with open hearts and quiet minds are the ones who truly find what they need." The royal felt humbled. He had always been used to others seeking his wisdom. Now, he was the one seeking, the one learning. He followed the woman as she led him through the village, teaching him about Earth's ways, about the simple truths that held everything together. As the days passed, the royal began to understand the quiet strength of Earth. It was not the power of armies or the force of words, but the strength of patience, of knowing when to act and when to wait. He learned that silence wasn't just about holding back words. It was about holding back actions until the right moment. One evening, as they sat by a fire, the royal asked the woman, "How do you know when to act?" She smiled softly. "We listen. To the land, to the people, to the stars. Everything has a time. Sometimes we must wait. Sometimes we must move quickly. But we never force it. And if we get it wrong," the royal asked. "Then we learn," she answered, "and we wait." Again, the royal felt a deep peace settle over him. He had spent so many years rushing, speaking, acting. Now he was learning the value of stillness, of being present without needing to control everything. After a week of learning, the royal stood at the edge of a field, looking out over the land. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the earth. The human woman, who had become his guide, joined him. They stood in silence for a long while, watching the world change before their eyes. Finally, the royal spoke. "I understand now," he said quietly. "True power isn't about strength. It's about knowing when to speak, when to listen, and when to wait." The woman smiled. "You are starting to see the heart of Earth. You are starting to understand." The royal nodded, his eyes on the horizon. "And this is the silence that holds the galaxy together." The woman's smile widened. "Yes. And now you know the truth." When the royal returned to Varintha Prime, he was not the same. He no longer shouted in meetings. He no longer demanded attention. Instead, he listened. He led with patience, with understanding. He knew that silence was not weakness, but strength. And the galaxy began to change. Other leaders, seeing the royal's example, started to listen more. They took time to understand each other, to learn. Before acting, war was no longer the first choice, but a last resort. Peace became the true measure of power. The royal's name became known not for his battles won, but for the peace he helped bring to the galaxy. And though many still whispered about the time he had mocked the human, they did not speak of it with shame. They spoke of it as the moment the royal had truly grown. The moment he had learned that sometimes silence was the loudest voice in the room. Time passed, and the royal's transformation continued. The galaxy, once full of tension and distrust, began to shift. Species that once fought over planets and resources started talking. They sought peace and cooperation, not through force, but through understanding. The royal, now known as the calm ruler of Varintha, had become a symbol of change. He often reflected on his time on Earth. He thought about the quiet moments by the fire, the lessons from the wise woman, and the peaceful way the Earth people lived. He had learned the importance of listening, of waiting for the right moment to act. And more than that, he had learned how powerful silence could be. Silence wasn't weakness. It was a way to hear the truth, to feel the pulse of the universe. The royal's advisors noticed his change. They watched as he made decisions more carefully, listened to others more deeply, and spoke less but with more weight. His calm leadership attracted many. Even those who had once doubted him now sought his advice. His meetings, once filled with arguments and loud demands, now had an air of peace. Even the toughest leaders from distant stars respected him. One day, the royal received an invitation. It was from Earth again. The message was simple. The Quiet One invites you to speak, not to give a speech, but to share what you have learned. The royal felt a sense of warmth and curiosity. It had been years since his visit to Earth, and now he was being asked to return. But this time, it wasn't to learn. It was to teach. He prepared for the journey in silence. Unsure of what he would say, he knew that words were powerful, but he also knew that they could be empty if not backed by true understanding. He didn't want to speak from pride or knowledge. He wanted to speak from experience. When his ship landed on Earth once more, he was greeted not by grand ceremonies, but by simple faces. The same woman, the one who had taught him the most, was waiting for him. Her eyes were warm, and her smile was kind. "Welcome back," she said softly. "Thank you," the royal replied. "I have learned much." They walked together to a quiet place by a river. The earth around them was peaceful, untouched by the chaos that still ran through other parts of the galaxy. The royal sat down beside the woman. He looked at the flowing water and thought about the lessons he had learned on this world. "You've changed the galaxy," the woman said after a long silence. "I didn't change it alone." The royal replied, "Many have changed with me, but Earth has been a great teacher." The woman nodded. "And now, it is your turn to teach." The royal was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Then he spoke, not with the loud voice of a ruler, but with the calm wisdom he had gained over the years. "The galaxy is filled with noise," he began. "So many voices shouting to be heard. So many hearts racing to prove their strength. But I have learned that silence speaks louder than all of that. Silence lets us listen. It lets us feel the world around us. And it allows us to understand, truly understand, the needs of others." He paused, looking at the woman beside him. "When I mocked the human all those years ago, I thought I was powerful. I thought that by mocking, I could show my strength. But what I failed to see was that real strength lies in restraint. Real power comes not from what we say, but from what we choose not to say. And it lies in how we treat those who are different, those who don't act like us." The royal looked out at the river, watching the water flow gently past. "Earth taught me that we don't need to fight for everything. We don't need to argue or raise our voices to prove that we are right. Sometimes, the quiet moments are the ones that bring the most change." The woman listened closely, her eyes full of understanding. "Yes," she said softly, "the quiet moments are the ones that last." The royal smiled, feeling a deep peace. Inside, "I used to believe that power came from conquering others, from being the loudest and strongest. But now I see that true power is in listening, in understanding, and in choosing peace over conflict." He stood and looked around at the peaceful land of Earth. "I have much to learn still, but I know that the galaxy is on the path to change, and I know that Earth has shown me the way." The woman smiled, standing beside him. "You have learned. Well, royal, now it is time for others to learn." The royal spent several days on Earth, speaking to leaders and sharing the lessons he had learned. He didn't give speeches or make demands. Instead, he spoke in quiet moments, in circles of friends, in places where the noise of the galaxy couldn't reach, and slowly, others began to listen. They began to understand that peace wasn't something to be fought for, it was something to be lived. When the royal returned to Varintha Prime, he did not return as the loud, proud ruler he had once been. He returned as a leader who had learned the value of silence, the strength of listening, and the power of patience. He led his people with a calm heart and steady hands, and slowly, the galaxy began to change. More and more species started to embrace the lessons of Earth. Leaders began to listen to each other. Conflicts, once common, began to fade. The royals' influence spread far and wide, not through fear or war, but through quiet wisdom and understanding. And as time passed, the galaxy became a place of peace. It was not perfect, but it was quieter, more thoughtful, and more compassionate. The royal knew that his work was not done, but he also knew that silence had already done more than words ever could. And so, the royal continued to lead, not through force, but through quiet strength. He remembered the human's simple words, "Not every fight needs noise. Sometimes silence is strength," and he carried that lesson with him always, sharing it with those who were willing to listen. The royal sat in his palace, overlooking the stars. His thoughts were as quiet as the space outside. It had been many years since he had first mocked the human at the peace gathering, and so much had changed since that moment. The galaxy was not the same place it had been when he had thought strength came from power and noise. Now, the royal understood that true strength lay in the quiet moments, the moments when one could listen, learn, and grow. He stood from his chair and looked out at the horizon. The peaceful world of Varintha Prime stretched before him, a land of quiet beauty. But even here, in this calm place, there was work to be done. The royal had learned many lessons, but he also understood that the galaxy's journey toward peace was far from finished. The invitation from Earth had come once again, and this time, it wasn't just a request for a visit, it was a challenge. Though not one made with words, it was an invitation to continue the work that had begun with the royal's own transformation. Earth had seen the changes in him, and now they wanted him to return. Not as a ruler, but as a teacher. They wanted him to share his lessons with others, to help guide the galaxy toward the peace that he had come to understand. He boarded the ship in silence, as he always did now. His mind was focused, not on grand speeches, but on the quiet moments he would share with others. He no longer sought the loud applause of others, nor did he crave the approval of those around him. What mattered now was that he lived in peace, and that he could help others find that same peace. When he arrived on Earth, he was greeted with a simple gesture, a nod, no grand welcome, no extravagant ceremonies. The human woman who had been his teacher all those years ago was waiting for him, and she smiled as she saw him approach. "You've changed," she said quietly, "but there is still much for you to teach." The royal nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "I've learned that there is no end to learning, and that the more we learn, the more we realize there is still so much more to understand." They walked together in silence, as they had all those years ago. This time, the royal did not ask questions. He simply listened. He watched the way the people of Earth lived. He saw how they moved through their days with a calm certainty, working together, living together, and facing the challenges of life with quiet strength. After a long walk, they reached a small village. It was simple, peaceful, and the royal could see that it was a place where people worked hard, but without hurry. There was no rushing here, no noise, just the gentle hum of life. "This is what I want to show you," the woman said. "Peace is not something that can be forced, it is something that must be lived." The royal nodded. "I understand." "Good," she said with a smile. "Then let us begin." They spent the next few days in the village, talking to the people, learning about their way of life. The royal saw that their strength did not come from wealth, or from weapons, or from power. Their strength came from their ability to live together, to work together, and to share in the quiet moments of life. The royal saw that the peace on Earth was not the result of one person's actions, but of many people working together, silently supporting one another. The true power of Earth, he realized, was not in its armies, but in its people. And the true strength of the galaxy would come not from one ruler, but from many people learning to live in peace. After his time in the village, the royal returned to Earth's capital. He stood before a large gathering of leaders from all over the galaxy. It was not the first time he had stood before such a crowd, but this time, he did not seek to impress. He did not seek applause. He simply sought to share what he had learned. He began speaking, his voice soft and steady. "When I first mocked the human at the peace gathering," he said, "I believed that strength came from power, from the loudest voice, from the strongest weapon. But I was wrong. The crowd listened in silence. The royal continued. Earth taught me that true strength is in silence, in listening, in understanding, in waiting for the right moment to act, and knowing when to hold back. He paused, letting his words sink in. The peace that Earth has found is not through battle, but through living together, through sharing. The quiet moments of life. It is not the strongest who will lead us to peace, but those who can listen and understand, those who can live in harmony, without needing to prove their strength. The royal looked around the room, his eyes meeting. The eyes of the leaders gathered there. This is the lesson that I bring to you, not with grand speeches, but with simple truth. Peace is not a destination, it is a journey, and it is a journey we must take together. He finished speaking and stepped back. There was no applause, no cheering, just a quiet understanding. The royal knew that his words had been heard, not because they were loud, but because they were true. As the leaders began to leave, one approached the royal. It was the alien royal from the Viranthian Empire, the same one who had mocked him. All those years ago, you were right, the Viranthian royal said. I thought I understood power, but now I see it in a different way. The royal smiled, his heart calm. We all must learn in our own time. The Viranthian royal nodded. Perhaps silence is the true strength after all. And with that, the royal knew his journey had come full circle. He had learned the lesson, and now he had helped others learn it as well. Peace was not something to be forced, it was something to be lived. And the galaxy was beginning to understand that, one quiet moment at a time.